Welcome, everybody, to our final case study in our final section of this Recruiting Academy course. Let's take a look at Josh. Josh has a 3.9 unweighted GPA and a 4.1 weighted GPA. He lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's a first-generation college student. Josh's parents are immigrants and don't have a ton of money, but they will be helping him pay for college with a contribution of up to $1,000 a year. He falls short of all Ivy League recruiting standards. Josh has thrown 52 feet in the shot put his junior year, which is equivalent to 11.1 in the 100 meters, 50.5 in the 400 meters, 158 in the 800, a 4:21 mile, 6:2 in the high jump, 21.6 in the long jump. So he's a very good athlete, but he's falling short of the Ivy recruiting standards. May of Josh's junior year. He throws 52 in the spring of his junior year. He reaches out to all Ivy League track and field teams via Instagram. 5 of the 8 respond to him, mostly with encouragement and a link to their recruiting standards, none of which he meets. Pro tip: Josh is smart here. He reaches out from an Instagram account that showcases his throwing and his incredible weight room numbers. A great way to increase his value by showing his future potential to coaches. However, he should have also emailed all 8 Ivy League coaches. Some coaches don't spend much time on social media, so it's important to contact them by email as well. Also, you never know what you're getting when you're contacting someone on Instagram. You may be looking and it says Cornell Throws, but Cornell Throws might be run by a student that graduated 5 years ago. You never know. You can contact the Instagram accounts. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's also important to send an email to the coach in the event group that you are interested in at that university as well. May continued. For the coaches who respond to him, he explains his story. His parents are immigrants and don't speak English. He works nearly full-time at their small business and helps with translation, taxes, and any paperwork that needs to be done. He's also new to the sport of track and field. He's only been throwing the shot for 10 months. He also has incredible strength numbers. While he's a bit undersized height-wise, he makes up for it in exceptional strength numbers. He squats 535 and benches 405 at age 17. So those are pretty crazy numbers. He's doing a nice job of painting the picture as to why he's actually better and more valuable than his PR suggests. And that's an important thing to a picture to paint, especially if you have all these significant indicators that that's actually true. June. He keeps the Ivy coaches updated with his performance, but does not improve beyond 52 feet. He also keeps the coaches informed as his strength numbers progress, because he's now squatted 585 and benched 415. Frankly, 585 and 415 are high enough strength levels to be an Ivy League champion, high enough strength levels to be an NCAA champion in the shot. Now, there are plenty of people who, and coaches will know this, there are plenty of people who can squat 585 and bench 415 who are terrible shot putters. You can find plenty of guys in powerlifting gyms who wouldn't be able to throw the shot. They're not dynamic in that way, but they are that strong. However, it's an important indicator, right? It's an indicator knowing that he hasn't been throwing for that long, and he also has incredible strength numbers. So you're starting, those are 2 big pieces to the puzzle. Pro tip: when communicating athletic strengths to college track and field coaches, it's important not to make them think that you enjoy anything athletically related more than track and field. For this example, if Josh gives off the impression that he likes the weight room more than throwing, he could be turning coaches away, because every throws coach has dealt with throwers who enjoy lifting more than throwing. Make sure to talk about how the weight room is translating to power in the ring or speed or out of the blocks, etc. This is a really big one. And for throws coaches, if you're a thrower and you're watching this and you love the weight room, make sure that you tell the coach that you love the weight room. But if you're telling them how much you love the weight room and you're not really talking about how much you love throwing, then you're turning them off. You're making them think, oh, man, every throws coach has had athletes that like the weight room more than throwing, and those people are very hard to coach. They never want to come down from super heavy training because that's what they really love. Likewise, if you also play soccer, let's say you play soccer and then you are a sprinter during the indoor and outdoor season. If you talk about soccer until your face turns blue on the phone with a coach, and then when it comes to talking about track, you talk a little bit, but there's more passion in your voice when you're talking about soccer. That coach is going to expect, if you're good at soccer, they're going to expect you to show up at that college and then try to walk onto the soccer team, which is the exact opposite of what you want to be communicating to coaches. You want to be communicating to coaches that you are all in on track and field, okay? And that is your number one passion. Whether or not it is, if you're trying to get in to an elite academic institution on your track and field ability, make sure that the coach thinks that you're all in. Another thing to note here is how you can do yourself a disservice by telling a coach that you want to play multiple sports. Sometimes coaches will ask that as a bit of a gotcha question. If you play multiple sports, let's say you play soccer and then indoor and then outdoor track. If a coach asks you, are you interested in playing soccer in college? And they're a track and field coach who's asking you that, you have to tread very lightly. And I would recommend saying, no, I'm interested in track and field in college. Because if you say that you're interested in soccer, now this track coach is wondering, should I use a support slot on this person? But if you're saying that, yes, you're interested in also playing soccer, they're afraid they're going to use a support slot on you. You're going to show up to campus and you're going to walk onto the soccer team. And now maybe you like soccer so much that you quit the track team, or maybe you get injured during the soccer season. And either way, you're not going to have the full preparation of the fall season to prepare you to compete at the collegiate level. And a lot of student athletes in high school don't understand that it requires more commitment to your sport to be an equal level of competitiveness in college, because people are working a lot more. They're putting a lot more energy and time into this than they did in high school. So you may be used to coming off the soccer season in great shape and then running really well, but you're going to be further behind coming off a soccer season and then running track than if you had come off a full fall season of training for track and field and then running track. That might be a little bit different when you're looking at a Division 3 school, because there are a lot of multi-sport athletes at the Division 3 level. So that's a tougher question to answer if a Division 3 coach is asking you if you're interested in multiple sports. What you can maybe say, if you're talking to a track coach and you also play soccer or you also play football, and if they ask you, are you interested in playing football in college as well? What you can say is, coach, track is my number one priority. And it would be great if I could do only track in college, but would it increase my value to the university and to you if I also played football? And you're telling them that track is your number one priority. But in some scenarios, a Division 3 school, it might increase your value if you can play multiple sports. And part of the reason for this is that Division 3 schools tend to be pretty small. So if you look at Cornell, which has 14,000 undergraduate students, and then you look at Williams, which has 2,000 undergraduate students, Williams will typically field almost as many teams as Cornell, despite having 1/7 the number of students on campus. But again, I think it's important, if you're looking to get a support slot for track and field, that you tell the coach that track and field is your first priority. At the Division 1 level, I don't think it makes any sense to tell a coach that you're interested in playing multiple sports. But at the Division 3 level, you want to tell them that you're focused on track and field, but if it would raise your value to play other sports, then you might be open to it. Okay, June continued. There are 3 Ivy League coaches who are still consistently responding to Josh's messages: Cornell, Dartmouth, and Penn. All 3 make it clear that he needs to improve his marks to be in the running for a recruiting slot, but they're all interested in having him on the team if he is admitted on his own to their school. He asks about an official visit, but all 3 schools decline. All 3 schools take his academic documents for an admissions pre-read in hopes that he will be able to improve his marks and be ready in the event that he applies and wants to walk on. June continued. Note, some Ivy League schools will have what they call preferred walk-on spots, which essentially means that the team will vouch for the athlete during the application process to let admissions know that they will be on the team if they are accepted to the university. To be very clear, this is not a support slot, and this is not nearly as significant of a help to a student athlete as a support slot, but it might be something that helps push the student over the top if admissions is on the fence about whether to admit or deny. So a support slot can push a student athlete who has little to no chance of being admitted to the university over the top and getting them admitted. Okay. It can push someone who falls below the typical range for a student in their test scores and their GPA over the top and get them admitted. Now, a preferred walk on spot is not going to do that. The only thing a preferred walk-on spot might do is if admissions is reading someone's application and they're already considering them an excellent applicant and they're trying to make a decision if they're going to accept that student, a preferred walk-on spot might be the thing that pushes them over the top. There is a team in the Ivy League that talks about preferred walk-on spots all the time with their students that they're recruiting, and they really make it out to seem like it holds a lot of weight. And this is a smart thing that they're doing and a very competitive thing that they're doing, but I want you to understand what's going on when someone's talking about a preferred walk-on spot. There are recruiting slots where the team can support your application and has a dramatic impact on your ability to be admitted. And there are preferred walk-on spots, which are significantly less important. Now, why would a school want to offer preferred walk-on spots? Here's what they do. If a school has incredible name recognition, maybe one of the most famous schools in the world, a lot of people want to go there. They're going to use their recruiting slots on their absolute highest athletes. And because there are so many people that want to go to a school that has such incredible name recognition, they have really incredible student athletes that they use their recruiting slots on. And they have other great student athletes who would be capable of getting support slots at other Ivy League schools that are willing to try to get into this Ivy League school on their own and with a preferred walk-on spot. Because they're getting that preferred walk-on spot and because they want to go to the school so bad, they're willing to forego opportunities on actual recruiting slots at other Ivy League schools in order to try to get in. And so that's very good for this school because they actually end up getting in. If the student is a really high student and a really high athlete, they have the chance of getting in on their own. Essentially, it's a freebie for the track program if they can get someone in with a preferred walk-on spot when they could have gotten in with a slot elsewhere. And so what happens a lot of times is that the coaches tell you apply as a preferred walk-on, and then a lot of times they don't get admitted, and now they're into the regular decision process with the rest of the Ivy League. If you are an athlete who is not being offered a support slot at any Ivy League schools, this preferred walk-on spot is great because at least you're getting something. But if you're an athlete who is getting opportunities and offers for support slots at other Ivy League schools, be very wary of deciding to try to get a preferred walk-on spot at a specific school because it's a lot less valuable. And if you don't get in, now you're in the regular decision process with the other Ivy League schools, and they may not have slots available for you at that point. It's an important thing to talk about because it's entirely possible that you'll run up against this in your recruiting process. When a coach submits a walk-on recruit to admissions pre-read in preparation for vouching for them as a walk-on, they will not actually receive any academic feedback or much academic feedback on the applicant. Admissions only produces a full pre-read on student athletes that are in the running for a support slot. The purpose of submitting the walk-on athlete is so that they are already in the system if the time comes to vouch for them in the application process, or if they improve from walk-on status to support slot status. The coach already has the academic documents and the athlete is already in the system. I'm telling you this because it is possible that if the coach is telling you that you're a walk-on and they're taking your academic documents for a pre-read, they may not be running you through a full pre-read. So it may not be a bad idea to ask, was this a full pre-read? Because I know that sometimes there's a walk-on pre-read and there's a full pre-read. Because if a coach is telling you, yeah, you're good, you're going to get in if you have a support slot, and you have a great chance to get in if you don't have a support slot, it's possible that they haven't even submitted a full pre-read for you because they're looking at you as a walk-on. And so they're not really doing their due diligence and getting a lot of feedback back from admissions. So you might essentially be applying and think that you're going to get this big bump because you have a green light from admissions and because you have this preferred walk-on spot. But it's possible that that coach is just telling you, just from a quick glance of your academics, that you're looking good. And they're saying you've got the green light from admissions, but you don't really. But if they're telling you that you're a walk-on or you're a preferred walk-on, it's not a bad thing to ask a clarifying question. Like, I know some walk-ons don't get a full pre-read done. Was this a full admissions pre-read with all the possible recommendations for improvement? Because I want to make sure that I'm crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's and giving myself the best chance of being admitted and ending up on your team. So you can make it like a positive. You're asking this question and you're asking it because you want to do your due diligence. And that's going to make a coach actually think, oh, this person is really does things the right way and wants to leave no stone unturned, which is the exact attitude that they want to see out of you as a student athlete for them as well. June continued. Josh already knows that he will be eligible for full tuition coverage at University of Wisconsin Milwaukee and is planning on attending there if he is not admitted to an Ivy League school. Pro tip: make sure that you have a backup plan that you are excited about. In this scenario, Josh is all set because he sees big positives to going to school at his local state school. He'll be able to graduate debt free and he'll still be able to help his parents with their business, which are both major wins for him. Be aware, though, that having an Ivy or bust mentality can leave you with a disappointing outcome if you don't end up at an Ivy and you don't have a strong backup plan like Josh. Some athletes are just all in. I'm going to the Ivy League. I'm going to the Ivy League. I'm going to the Ivy League. And that's all well and good. And I like the attitude. But if you don't have a backup plan and then you don't end up in the Ivy League and you end up at some place you're not excited about, then you should have had a backup plan. I don't think that having a backup plan makes you less likely to succeed in your primary plan. So just get a few schools that you're interested in and excited about that you're pretty sure you're going to be able to get into. So have some of those as a backup. Have one that if all else fails, I'll go here. If Josh weren't also excited about University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, it might make sense for him to look into some top academic D3 schools. Josh, however, has decided he wants to go D1 no matter what because he knows he excels in the small fish in a big pond environment. So, University of Wisconsin Milwaukee is free and it's a perfect fit as a backup for Josh. Josh competes at a few more meets but does not improve his mark. He fills out the financial aid calculators at Penn, Cornell, and Dartmouth and finds that he's eligible for full financial aid, meaning that if he is admitted, he will not pay anything to attend. Josh is still confident that he will be able to increase his marks and get an Ivy support slot. Okay, now we're on to October. We were in July before, so nothing really happened in August or September. There you go. More or less nothing happens in Josh's recruiting process until October. Penn, Cornell, and Dartmouth all reiterate that he will not be offered a support slot without an improvement in performance. They all encourage him to apply early decision and offer him the preferred walk-on status. Now, not every coach is going to use the preferred walk-on terminology, but they'll usually tell you you'll be a preferred walk-on or that they can make a note that you'll be on the team if you're admitted. Now, in Josh's situation, these are good opportunities for him because he doesn't have support slots at other Ivy League schools. The thing you want to watch out for is taking a preferred walk-on spot when you have an actual support slot at another university. Cornell coach tells him that if he applies early decision and is not admitted, he can make sure that Josh is deferred rather than rejected, which would keep his options open for regular decision. Typically, a rejection in the early process will rule out an applicant for regular at that university as well. So, this is something that I can't say for sure that all Ivy coaches can do this, but I believe that all Ivy coaches can do this. If you have a student athlete who applies and is rejected, early decision, then they cannot be admitted regular decision. So that's another reason that a coach might submit someone for a preferred walk-on spot because it gives them the opportunity potentially to have the athlete deferred rather than rejected so that if they improve during the indoor season and now they are in a position to get a support slot, they can have a support slot and be admitted to the university rather than having been rejected and then they're done for that year. The other Ivy coaches would likely have been able to do the same for Josh, but they didn't take the time to do so as they were busy with coaching, official visits, and enticing their top recruits to commit. So some coaches really only focus on their top recruits and just don't worry about the walk-ons because realistically, most people who are going to perform at a high level in college are the ones that are in a high level in high school, but not always. So some coaches will go out of their way to recruit more walk-ons than others. It's just part of the game. October continued. Josh would prefer Penn to Cornell, but the coach hasn't offered to defer to avoid rejection if he's not admitted. Josh contacts the Penn coach and asks if they can make sure that he is deferred if he's not admitted so that he can be in the running for regular decision. And the coach agrees. And Josh applies early decision and alerts the Penn coach that all application materials have been submitted. In December, so we just jumped from October, so leading up to the November 1 early decision deadline, Josh determines that he wants to apply early decision to Penn. He doesn't have a support slot, but he's a great student and he's first generation college student, so he's got as good a shot as anybody. Now it's December, and he unfortunately learns about his deferral to Penn. He applies to Cornell, Dartmouth, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, regular decision. Josh competes at his first indoor meet and throws a new PR of 52.6. He messages the Cornell, Dartmouth, and Penn coaches with the update. In January, Josh PRs again, increasing his best to 52.10 and updates the coaches. The Cornell coach reaches out to Josh and asks for Josh to commit to Cornell, and in return, he will advocate for a support slot to Josh. It turns out that a Cornell Sprints recruit who was supported during the early decision process had been deferred. Eventually, they lost interest and decided to commit elsewhere. So a support slot opened up. Because Josh has had such an awesome attitude through the process, and he's new to the sport and improving at each meet, and has such huge strength numbers, the Cornell throws coach is going to look past his PRs and look past the fact that he doesn't meet the recruiting standards, and he wants to go advocate to the Cornell head coach for Josh to get a slot. This is another one of these situations where Josh is just hanging in there and doing a great job getting across what his value is. And at this point, Josh is now at the top of the list when a support slot opened up. And it's possible that no support slots could have opened up. But in this scenario, the Cornell sprinter applied early decision and was deferred. And now they're having to go through the regular application and they're hoping that they're going to get in, but admissions is being wishy-washy. And eventually a lot of student athletes just they say, you know what, forget it. I don't want to sit around here forever hoping to find out if I'm going to get in. With admissions being wishy-washy and deferring and maybe asking for more things, eventually they may just say, I'm not going to wait here and miss out on other opportunities. And that's what that sprinter did. They said, see you later. I'm going to go take another opportunity. And that made that support slot open up. And Josh was there and ready. So the head coach agrees to support Josh's application. January continued. The Cornell coach changes the classification of Josh from walk-on to recruited student athlete within the admissions pre-read portal and submits the additional documentations for the admissions pre-read. So in this situation, while the Cornell coach had already collected Josh's pre-read documents, he had submitted Josh to admissions as a walk-on. So they hadn't done a full pre-read. And so now the Cornell coach is going through the full pre-read process because he has to go through the full pre-read process in order to support Josh's application. That may be different at every school, but most Ivies you'll need to go through the pre-read process, even if the athlete has already applied. Admissions reviews the documents and alerts the Cornell coach that they are not going to count Josh's dual enrollment engineering design course at the local community college as a solid, leaving Josh with only 3 academic solids for the first semester. Additionally, they will not count his marine biology dual enrollment course as a solid, leaving him with only 3 solids for the second semester of his senior year. So, this is the first official pre-read at any Ivy League school that Josh is getting. Because while the Dartmouth and the Penn and the Cornell coach all submitted his information as a walk-on, he's getting a full admissions pre-read now at this point. And the fact that Cornell is not counting one of his academic classes in the fall and one in the spring as a solid is giving us some insight maybe on why he was deferred to Penn during the early decision process. It's possible they deferred him because they said, well, he doesn't have 4 solid. And so that actually brings up another point, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but dual enrollment courses, while they are wonderful things, you have to be careful about how a university is going to see those. That engineering design course, they're not counting that as a solid. Some Ivy League schools may count it as a solid, but some may not. Whereas chemistry, physics, biology, your really classical science that you would take in high school are going to be counted as core solids. But sometimes marine biology, more specific things may or may not be counted. And this is one of those reasons that it's really good to start your recruiting process early. Because if you're going through the admissions pre-read process in July, you have plenty of time for admissions to tell you, oh, those don't count as solids. And that's great because then you can go change your class schedule and you're plenty early to do so. But if you're going through this pre-read process in January, it's really late. You're probably not going to be able to change your classes, and that could preclude you from getting into one of these schools. And this is where you need to, again, balance getting the information that's going to help you with also being a nuisance. Because if you get all the information that you need from a college coach, but it makes you a nuisance, then now you're not on the top of their list when a support slot opens up. But it's not a bad idea if you are a walk-on to ask the coach, did I get a full admissions pre-read to get all the information back? And if not, can you just at least give me some information on if you think they'll count these classes as solids? January continued. As a result, Josh does not meet the 4 solids rule and will need to change his classes or add a solid in order to be considered for admission. The coach relays this information to Josh and asks if Josh is able to make any class changes. Unfortunately, he cannot, since the second semester is already underway. Josh feels like he cannot take on another full class as he is already taking 2 APs and 2 dual enrollment classes, and he is working nearly full time for his parents' business. What I mean by this last point here is that if Josh only has 3 classes that are being counted as solids, another thing that he could do, if he can't make a schedule change, he can't change one of his classes to something that will be considered a solid. The other option would be just to add a solid, like actually add another class. So instead of taking these 4 classes, he would now take 5 classes. Or instead of taking 6 classes and only 3 of them are counting as solids, you can add another solid. So you'll be taking 7 classes and 4 will count as a solid. But he's working almost full time for his parents. So how's he going to have any time when he has 2 APs and 2 dual enrollment courses? So the coach then asks for Josh to submit a written statement explaining his situation in hopes that admissions will understand and waive the 4 solids rule. Josh reaches out to Penn and Dartmouth to let them know that he has a recruiting slot with Cornell and see if they can offer one as well. Because he's going through this process with Cornell, and while he has committed to Cornell in order for them to get a recruit slot, but now he's realizing, well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get in because there's all these hiccups with my class schedules. So he circles back around to Penn and Dartmouth to see, can you offer a support slot as well? Because maybe he won't have that problem with the 4 solids with them. Penn has found themselves in a similar situation with a number of their recruits falling through and decides to support Josh's application. Josh is issued a likely letter by the Penn admissions office a week later. What's happened here is Josh applied to Penn early decision with no support slot. He gets deferred, and it maybe wasn't clear exactly why he was deferred. But now that we're looking at it, he may have been deferred because he only had 3 solids. And they weren't going to admit him because he didn't have a support slot and he didn't have 3 solids. Then he gets an offer for a support slot with Cornell, but Cornell actually plays hardball and says, no, you don't have 4 solids, so you need to do something. You need to change something. And he's working through the process with the Cornell throws coach to try to get Cornell to waive the 4 solids rule. But while that's happening, he circles back to Penn, and Penn gives him a support slot. And with the support slot, the Penn admissions department says, you know what? He's a great applicant. He only has 3 solids, but he's taking these dual enrollment courses. He's a first generation college student, and now he's got a support slot. Penn says, forget 4 solids. Or maybe Penn counted his engineering class as a solid, and they counted his marine biology class as a solid. So either way, Penn looks at the whole picture and says, with the support slot, Josh, you're good. Come on in. And so there you go. Josh calls to tell the Dartmouth and Cornell coaches that he will be attending Penn and thanks them for their time. And that's the end of Josh's recruiting process. And he did a great job. He was accepted into the Ivy League while falling well below recruiting standards at all the Ivy League schools. I mean, he did it because he was a first generation college student that worked in his favor. He had great grades that worked in his favor. He had a great attitude and the coaches loved talking to him. He has huge strength numbers, which he did a great job of showcasing. And he did a nice job improving during the indoor season. So a lot of positives worked in his favor to really lift his value despite falling below the recruiting standards. So Hopefully, some of you that are in this scenario where you may fall below recruiting standards at all the Ivy League schools, but really want to go, now have a sense of how that might work for you. But keep in mind that Josh had his backup plan as Wisconsin Milwaukee. Josh could go Ivy League or bust. And if he busts on the Ivy League, he goes to UW Milwaukee. He's going to be on the team and he's got full academic aid there. So he doesn't need to commit there. He's got a great backup plan. If you're somebody who's also looking at a bunch of top D3 schools and you try to go for the Ivy League or bust situation, you may be missing out on all those D3 opportunities because getting into that D3 school, you can't assume that you're just going to get in there. All this is to say that if you are looking at a lot of D3 schools and a lot of Ivy League schools at the same time, then waiting until January to find out if you're going to have a support slot may not be an option because you may have to take something D3 a lot earlier and then you'll never get to find out because you will have committed. So you want to make your choice and then stick with it. In this scenario, it really worked very nicely for Josh that he stuck in it and played the long game and he won the long game. I hope after going through these 4 case studies that you have a pretty good sense of a lot of the things that could happen. And maybe a few of these things will happen to you, and then you'll kind of have a sense of how to handle them.